Okay, what I'm going to talk about here are some of the long-term systemic problems I have noticed about the Remainer/rejoiner movement within the UK, which I've noticed over the years. I will declare my bias. I am a leaver. So yeah, that's it. So there's a lot of very, very strange tropes within the rejoiner movement, which may have been present before the UK wanted to leave, but they're certainly evident now. I'm just going to talk on the top of my head about what I've noticed. The most striking characteristic of the rejoiners is their absolute refusal to do any kind of significant academic study on the socio-legal structures of their favourite institution, namely the European Union. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that they don't know a damn thing about the EU. They don't know anything. I had the advantage, like many other people, of being taught about the nature of EU law, the constitution of the EU, the interaction of EU law with the British Constitution and our own legal system. I was taught that at law school, like a lot of people have. I don't even know if they teach EU law anymore, to be honest. I hope not. But I was at law school when the vote happened, which caused all manner of problems. But that's the funny. They don't know anything about the EU. If I ask them, list all the sources of EU law, go. List all the sources of EU law. They don't know. If I was going to say to them, give me a brief description of the origin of the concept of the supremacy of EU law. Nothing. Okay. If I was going to say, give me a brief description of the constitution of the EU. Where does it get its powers? How does it arrange these powers? How does it differentiate between certain types of powers? Nothing. I might get a few words like commission and parliament and council, but you don't get anything substantive. So that's a really, really interesting thing with the rejoiners, is that they don't know anything about the European Union, about how it works as a system. They probably know all the buzzwords. They got the script nailed down. Oh, it's about seeing Kumbaya and going on holiday without showing your passport. Okay, fair enough. But how does it actually function as an institution? Not a clue. And that really bothered me for a long time. And then I realized why they don't know anything about it. It's because they're not interested. The rejoiners don't care about the EU. Just its superficialness. It's like a restaurant. They don't care what goes on in the kitchen. Okay? They just want whatever it is that lands on their table. The funny thing is they don't even know what lands on the table, but that's it. They're not interested. They've had the better part of a decade to read probably 3 or 4 articles on Wikipedia, which are more than adequate in describing the basic organizational ability of the EU, and they haven't done it. So I've raised this point with them ad nauseum, and it's a case of, well, it doesn't really matter. Why are you supporting something you're not even interested in? Imagine if I'm not a football fan, but imagine if I said I'm a football fan, and a hardcore football fan said to me, okay, what do you think about this team? And I said, I don't know. I've never heard of them. You would quickly deduce that I am not a football fan. I might think that I'm a football fan, but in reality I'm not. And you would discard any opinions I have about the sport of football as trivial and irrelevant because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing with the rejoiners. They don't know what they're talking about, and I can prove it because you just ask basic questions, and the vast majority, some of them do know, but the vast, vast majority don't. And the reason why they don't know is they don't care. Because it's just, a trope, a trend. It's just fashionable to them. So that's trait number one. What's another trait? The other fascinating thing is they don't seem to learn from their failures. And I think it's fair to say they have suffered significant failures. They don't, not only do they don't learn, but they refuse to accept the fact that they have made mistakes. So the script that they have about why we must resubject ourselves to the German hegemony, that's what it is. It's a German-dominated trade bloc. It can't be anything else. That is exactly the same script they had in 2015. It's undergone no significant revision. Well, it's to do with trade and like solidarity and stuff. Is that it? It hasn't gone in any revision, and they can't revise it, as far as I can tell. And things like, we were told we would be in a full technical recession by 2017 merely by voting to leave, and that didn't happen. That's a failed prophecy. That's a failed prediction. That illustrates that your ability to predict is compromised, which means that your other predictions are all underlined as suspect. We were told, that the EU economy would nosedive prior to COVID. And if these people think that COVID didn't have a serious effect on our economy, it did. Prior to COVID, it was almost business as usual. Even in COVID, they said there was going to be food shortages. I think it was Christmas 2021. Yes, 2021. Or whatever. They said there was going to be food shortages. They said there was going to be fuel shortages. They made all these predictions. And it didn't happen. Now, did they sit down and think, maybe our ability to cast long-term predictions is suspect. We must reevaluate our predictive algorithms. No. They just carried on, and they're predicting every single thing that happens. This is the end. It's all due to Brexit. And this is not the first time that the Europhiles have been in this situation. The lies they told to con the UK into the 1973 or 1974 referendum, I always get the EC Act mixed up. They all fell apart. They said we had to join the EU to begin the economic regeneration of the UK. And by the end of the decade, the UK had had a housing crisis. We'd had continued economic decline. Our agriculture industry almost collapsed. And we had to be bailed out by the IMF. So joining the EU didn't help, did it? Same with the common exchange rate mechanism. Total disaster. They don't learn from their failures, which means they're doomed to predict them, repeat them. And they can't change their rhetoric. Because the world has changed since 2015, but they're still using the script from that era. And they can't change it. Because the script is all they have. It's this belief in the power of the script. But the script is poorly written and incoherent, so something. So they don't change, they don't review, and they don't update, and they don't adapt to. What's another problem that the rejoiners have? Their ignorance is a big one. That really is fascinating to me. I mean, it's fascinating. Just think about it. You're allied with an institution that you willfully choose not to learn anything about. You don't care where it came from. You don't care how it thinks. You don't care what it produces. Why? I know why, but do you guys know why? So they don't learn. The other thing is that this is probably going to be the third last point. They don't look. Yeah, they I forgot what it is. They don't know anything. They don't self-reflect on their failures. The other thing is they. can I put this? Oh yeah, the other thing that they got wrong is I think the law of unintended consequences, particularly through the courts. Gina Miller's case, for example, was a utter disaster for the Remainers. So much so, I think if Miller had lost, the situation would have been turned out very, very different. What do I mean by that? What Miller against R was, what it basically said is that leaving the EU via an instrument of the executive was unconstitutional because leaving the EU would mean that we would lose major rights and only Parliament can undo rights, therefore the decision has to be from Parliament. Something like that. It was a convoluted mess, whatever it was. She's actually wrong because if we had left on that day, all of EU law would have remained on the statute books anyway. So, but I think the defence agreed with her. So, what that did is it took the issue of Brexit as an issue of treaty negotiation out of the hands of the executive and put it into the Commons as an issue of drafting legislation. Disaster. Because Theresa May and her friends wanted to keep the treaty negotiations like any other treaty negotiations. Basically, the treaty would have been written almost in secret in a smoke-filled room. Some 500,000-page document would then be dumped on the feet of Parliament. They'd be given like a week to read it, if that, and then they vote on it. They could have snuck in almost anything. What happened is we brought the construction of the leaving agreement into the cold, hard light of the cameras in Parliament, and we saw who the Remainers were. We saw that Jeremy Corbyn was getting up every bloody week trying to throw a spanner in the works of Brexit, and then having the gall to claim that he supported it. It brought the formation of the leaving process into the public forum, which was not what they wanted. So that's an interesting lesson. Law of unintended consequences. So to sum up, the ignorance of the self... ignorance is an unkind word because they're not ignorant. They know exactly that they don't know anything. So that the willful lack of knowledge of the Remainers, their inability to change their script to adapt to new circumstances, and their inability to reflect on why their predictions are wrong. And lastly, the law of unintended consequences, particularly through the courts. I think there must be other court cases that they've totally botched. Or am I thinking about the SNP? That's another, yeah. So, if you notice, there wasn't really any major Remainer action through the court. Oh, there was the attempt to get the prorogation of Parliament thrown out, which worked, which kind of backfired anyway because the Tories then won a massive landslide. But the courts really are a double-edged sword, and I don't think the Remainers understand how the law works in this country. So there. But their ignorance is really interesting. Ask them. Ask them what are the different types of EU law. What basic stuff. I mean, the origin of sovereignty of Parliament. You can say, okay, what does the ECJ adjudicate on? Where does the EU get its powers from, ultimately? How would you even describe the European Union? Ask them, what is it? Tell them what the EU is. The trendy script argument is, oh, it's a treaty organisation. Okay, well, how do these treaties interact with the various constitutions of the member states? I'm all ears. It's highly unlikely that they'll know anything. I've been debating Remainers for years. They don't know. The ignorance about the supremacy of EU law is probably the worst one. That is almost indefensible. oh no, we were still sovereign in the EU. Well, some of the most prestigious judges of the 20th century in the UK would disagree with you, and all the major legal scholars would disagree with you. But no, they know better. So yeah, food for thought.